Hello and welcome to Sheila Lives Out Loud. My name is Sheila Moniga. Thank you so much for catching up with me. I am thrilled you're on this channel. Please click subscribe and hit notifications so you catch up with uploads every Monday. And today I'm joined by two excellent gentlemen, and they're going to be speaking about sport and sponsorship and the way forward, not just for athletes, but for corporates, for people who love sport. For us, we love to go watch sport, but now with COVID and the new world order, the new normal, what does that mean? Thank you so much, Martin Kano, the founder of Martin Kano Sports Holdings and the CEO of IMG, Peter Gesharu. I know you guys are enjoying your time out. I think, Martin, you're not in Nairobi.
Yes, I'm out in Eldoret. Nice and quiet out here.
Fantastic. It clearly works for you. You look, I'm not saying you look bad the last time I met you. You know, complimenting people sometimes is a very difficult job. It's just that, what do you mean? How did I look then and now? And Peter, once in a while I get to see you out of a suit. And you're looking great too. I hope you're keeping well in this lockdown season.
Yeah, we're doing very well. It's different working from home, not getting to go out as often as we'd like, but obviously missing the action out there. But at least there was some positive yesterday. The Bundesliga had their first set of games yesterday, and let's see whether other people are able to pick it up. And we're all looking to going back to normal, or is it the new normal? One of them, but at least going back to something.
Right. For sure, we will be going back to something, and maybe perhaps in discussions and conversation, we'll figure that out and understand what that's going to look like so we can begin to make adjustments. But I'd like to start off with Martin. And Martin, I'd like us to think about professional athletes, many of whom were preparing for the biggest competition of their lives this year, the Olympics. So what does this mean for professional athletes who've been training for 4, 8, 10 years, building up to 2020 and finding out that, no, sorry, it's not going to happen this year? What happens next for them?
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation for a lot of athletes whose goal were the Olympics this year, because that's usually the focus for most for 4 years. And without that in the calendar, or literally any other event, it poses a big challenge to athletes, because they have to sit at home, do nothing, or just do the bare minimum just to stay somewhat fit. So it really it poses a huge challenge on their physical and their mental capacities, because that's all you know what to do. So this is a really strange year for a lot of athletes, and not just the Olympics. But those, many major championships that are going to happen this year, as well as the circuit happening around the world in preparation for the Olympics. Yeah, so that means, of course, their incomes drop dramatically to zero for those ones who don't have any shoe contracts or prior engagements. So it's a massive blow to athletes around the world, not having to do anything and not sure when, even if events have been pushed towards the second half of the year, we're still not sure that will happen for a lot of these athletes. So it's quite a difficult position for a lot of these athletes in that regard.
Okay. It takes me back to our conversation last year concerning how athletes manage their funds. Because if athletics, for instance, is your sole income earner, it's your day job, really, for all intents and purposes. And now you're not in a position where you can go to work like you're used to working. It means you're not making the checks. How are local athletes surviving? I know you manage quite a few, but how is it for athletes that in this environment now? Because I think even training camps are closed. So how are athletes surviving?
Okay, it's of course very many are struggling to survive, and as you pointed out earlier, runners earn income in 3 different ways: through sponsors, prize money, and/or bonuses from races. And that's dependent on placing and speed and appearance fees. So without this, without any races, there's no chances of any of that, getting that. So it really just for those who have made some kind of income, it's now going back to either their businesses or investments or farms or some kind of a way to diversify their income or make use of their investments. For those who are dependent on races to make any income, who've never really had any substantial income to live off of, it poses a big problem for them and their families because this is all they're dependent on. So very few have diverted to either farming or some other kind of alternative source of income, which isn't, of course, as great as the income on the roads and tracks. So yeah, it poses a really big burden to them.
Right now I speak to Peter, and it's all about dollars and sponsorship. We've just heard not everybody is able to make that money. Not everyone has been able to secure the bag in that way. So many of our athletes are looking to alternative sources of income. I'm not going to ask you to speak on behalf of the government, but I'd like to know, as a corporate entity that's worked on sponsorships with government and the private sector, what's happening with athletes who are struggling? Have any reached out for assistance to, say, federations, organizations, or associations?
It's quite interesting to where we are right now in terms of the whole sports industry as a business. As you can imagine, a lot of athletes are not just out of an income, but a lot of even out of psych, and they need a lot of help. They need a lot of assistance. Athletes usually work from almost a project point of view, especially our, let me say, our track and even road races. They work on a project. If I know I've got a race in 3 months, then I am then going to train looking forward to the 3 months. So my training program is all set to the 3 months. When I hit my highs, when I hit my lows, I have a target. So right now those targets have been removed. Well, the thing that makes you get up every morning and go through a rigorous training program is the target. So if I know in 3 weeks' time I have this kind of race, there is a way that they program themselves. The same case for footballers and everything. You work towards a target, you work to hitting your peak at the championships time, and so on. So not having that target removes a lot of psyche from the athlete himself. So mentally, the athletes who really make a living from this space, and we really need to look at sports as a big business. It's one of the biggest businesses in the world. And the areas that we've been making revenue as a whole, so that it can trickle down to the athletes is through the events themselves, the championships themselves. And when they do not happen, then obviously there'll be no money trickling in, so that that this can then translate to right to the athletes themselves. But I must say that Martin and I sit on the marketing commission of the National Olympic Committee, and we're already putting an initiative to just identify athletes that are in need. The Tennis Federation is doing very well. They had some athletes that they had put on a program, on a training program, who are from less fortunate backgrounds, and they've been supporting them with food rations and assistance just to keep them going, keep their site going. We've had some corporates that are working with the ministry to give some tokens to athletes, but getting the athletes basically is the biggest problem, because we know the elite, the people who are already in competition, but there is always an athlete 5 years away from a competition. There's always an athlete 3 years away from a competition who might not have reached a threshold of earning money, and therefore probably lives on his parents and so on. But if his parents is out of a job currently or he's been laid off, then they are not able to support the youngsters to actually hit the training grounds every day. They're probably now being forced to go to the farms or something like that. And a lot of uncertainty around the space. So if the family incomes are affected, families are the first sponsors for athletes, especially for upcoming athletes. So that's one area that's actually going to be affected. The other one is, of course, schools. Schools are closed. The place with the best facilities, even in our country today, is still going to be the schools. That's where you get to try all the sports. So if we continue doing homeschooling as it is today, that means our children are not getting an opportunity to try out 5 different sports. And that's going to mean that in a couple of years, we're not going to have rising. I mean, when we went to school, you probably tried hockey, you tried volleyball, you tried swimming, depending on what.
There's going to be a missing gap.
Yeah.
Listening to what you've said and what Martin has said, I can't help but begin to imagine that COVID has really brought to the forefront the need for a welfare program for all athletes, not just established athletes, but those who are deciding this is going to be my profession. This is what I'm going to do, whether it's a day job, whether it's full-time, whether it's part-time. It's pointing to the need for some sense of safety net for occasions like these, because we didn't imagine COVID and we don't know what's coming up. Human experiences, we like to imagine we know what's coming, but we really don't. So this speaks to a welfare fund of sorts that can mitigate and assist athletes in times such as these. How is that welfare fund going to be created and managed? Food for thought for now. But I'd like to go back to Martin, and I'd like to pick your thoughts on the way forward, knowing what's happened now and what Peter has spoken to. A lot of kids are at home, they're not at school practicing, they're not at school learning, they're not at school training. What does this mean for the future of sports for Kenya? What does this mean? Is there going to be in 10 years a missing generation that could have been running the marathons, but they weren't because 2020 happened?
Very possible. I think it's going to affect the future going forward, because if you look at the motivational angle it brings to a lot of these young and upcoming athletes who, won't see the motivation of participating in sports because the returns are very little or none for upcoming athletes. So why bother coming into the sport if you know you're not going to get an income? If it already is difficult for the stars, and particularly here in Kenya, where the financial rewards are a huge motivational factor for young athletes to come into the sport, because they see very close their neighbors being successful in sport and the rewards that that come out of it. A nice big house, farm, nice cars, business, whatever that comes out of sport. If that reduces significantly, then the motivational factor reduces. So yes, people will look back to 2020 as a difficult year for sports and athletes. That could be the year that started the downturn, because I see, like you were discussing earlier with Peter, what will sponsors do? Will they stay in the sport with less money and try and build again? That's something that we fear, that, now athletics may not attract as much sponsorship in the short term, which will affect, again, quality, which will affect the rising stars and our future champions. Yeah, so that is definitely a factor, that how this year will affect the sport going forward, right? And for some countries and federations and bodies have actually launched some kind of fund. It may be a drop in the well, but it's still something, and that just goes to show that federations or governing bodies have to start thinking about setting aside some kind of welfare program, and depending on how what level of funding you attract, that you can benefit from something like that, which will go to shore up the fortunes of athletes in this trying times.
Right. We go back to sponsorships, and Peter, this question is especially for you. You mentioned the Bundesliga at the beginning of this conversation, and I think there's certain countries where they're saying, okay, we're going to have athletes play to empty stadia. we're going to have people tune in either online or pay channels so that you can access these matches. What does that mean for the amounts of money that we've been seeing spent on sports so far? Is it going to be less? Is it going to be more? Who stands to make more money now? Will it be the carriers of the content? Will it be the athletes? There's so much that's changing now. Help us understand the dynamic.
Obviously, there is quite a big change that's going to happen in our space from the sports business perspective. Even with the Bundesliga, I was listening to one of the commentaries, and they said one of the motivations for them to get back is out of the 36 teams on the top tier, 13 were going to go bankrupt if the league did not go back on in the next 2 months. So within our own federations and a lot of sports organizations, we've been living hand to mouth. We've been not having any reserves, so we can't continue paying the players beyond 1 month out of the league. The biggest revenue in sports today, all the way from the Olympics, almost every sport you can think of today is being television of live games. And that's what most of the leagues are hoping, the established leagues are hoping that they can actually get back to live games, because that's where the money is. The gate collection did not contribute direct. There's only 30,000 people that can come in to, 30,000 people that can come into a stadium or thereabouts. It's not a big amount compared to what you get from television. However, those 30,000 people do create the atmosphere that make television that more interesting. So we're seeing a big change. There was a reason that sponsors were coming into this space. It was not just the eyeballs, but also creating opportunities for interaction. Martin and I think have been into some of the Olympics, and you see, despite the big sponsorships coming in from even, let's say, companies like McDonald's and Visa, they had a lot of interaction and activation spaces within the Olympic spaces. So it was not just being seen on TV, it is the interaction on ground. So that is going to shift. And my take is that the need that corporates had is still there. The need hasn't disappeared. So it's for us in sports to ensure we're able to meet that need that sponsors had before they actually find another avenue, and we're going to lose out. So for now, the quick win for most of the federations are looking is to going back to television. But that's for the established ones. I was thinking about, what about our local federations? We hardly have any live television that is, anybody's paying for, or any of our teams, our federations can say they're actually making money out of live television. I think a couple of years back, maybe five or so, when we still had SuperSport with the Premier League, there was some money going directly to the teams from television, but that ended. So you can imagine what's going to happen today if, say, our football league or even rugby sevens got back without any fans in the stadium and without television. They'll be playing to themselves. There'll be absolutely no reason for a corporate to come in. And remember, the corporates have also taken a big hit. Most of them are thinking about laying off staff during this time.
I think most of them are beyond thinking about it. It's already happening as we speak.
Yeah, so they're not going to be throwing away money. They're not going to be giving money to sports out of CSR. They'll be giving money to sports because you're providing a rescue package. You're providing a rescue package to their business. So it will stop being, it's not sports about just us playing and being on the playoff field. It's us as a marketing tool for our sponsors. So we will need to go back and think hard and say, beyond television, beyond the activations that we had on ground, what are the other things that attracted corporates to the sports space? Is it the equalizer? Is it having a space that was, good for all and, non-political space where they could actually interact with their clients? Is it how we developed the stars and then they were able to use those to market? Stars with good following. How are we doing on the digital space? I remember last time we talked about how corporates and all can make use of their of the digital space. Those who haven't caught up, I guess they probably have to start running really, really fast right now, because that's the only space that's available for us.
Peter, you've talked about sponsorship and the monies involved, but when I think about sports, sports is contact, sports is camaraderie, sports is about teams working together. COVID is not disappearing in 3 months, and one of the biggest key issues is social distancing. How are we going to social distance when we're boxing? Martin, what happens to some of these sports going forward? Are they going to be obsolete? Are we going to have to come up with new ways to wrestle? I mean, sometimes I sit back and I think, and I'm just not quite sure what I'm looking at. But what happens to some of these games? Are you hearing concern from some of these athletes and sportsmen and women in certain sports wondering, is there a future in this?
Absolutely. I mean, the way sports is going to move on from this COVID will require some major changes to particularly some sports. And not only the real contact sports like wrestling, boxing, those ones, but think about a marathon. How many people show up at a major marathon? Thousands and thousands. How are you going to social distance, enforce social distance with 30,000 people? Or people sitting in the stadium. People are playing now to empty stadiums, because you just can't have the crowds anymore. So yeah, it's going to force sports to relook at some of these events and say, how do we go ahead, do this? Do we cover ourselves appropriately, or do we separate ourselves appropriately? All those kinds of things. I sat in on a webinar a couple of days ago, and major event organizers like London Marathon organizer type people all came in together, and we were discussing what is the future of major marathons. How do you get people to the start, first of all, and then let them go? And then during the race, how do you separate them? It makes it quite difficult to run some of these events with the social distancing protocols that are out there now. We really have to relook at how to organize some of these events and how people will participate, particularly the mass participation events like the marathons and road races. Things are going to have to change if COVID is going to persist. But there are ways that that people are starting to really look at the sports and say, do we continue with them, or do we, introduce some protocols that will protect participants as they get on in the sports, because it makes it so difficult. How do you box? How do you race to the finish of a major marathon with a couple of hundred people around you? And
PPEs, you've got a hazmat suit on.
Yeah, I mean, of course, yes, you can wear the masks and wear the gloves, but how efficient is that for top sports? To do as well as you can using those PPEs. So there's a lot of questions that are being asked out there on how our modern sport will go on from here. Post COVID, how will we sustain some of these sports and events going forward? Yeah, so that's a conversation that is ongoing.
All right. Now, speaking about sports organization, Peter, I know as IMG, you've been responsible for the organization and coordination of several marathons that happen on an annual basis. And I'm just thinking, safety standards are key with COVID, social distancing, keeping covered. I know a lot of the population will show up for the different marathons that you partner with different corporate organizations on. But I'm also thinking about the way forward for event organizers like yourself. If we're not running, if the public is not out there, signing up for charity causes, signing up for marathons, how is the sports business, how is the sports event business going to evolve? Where are you guys going to be? Is there a future there?
I think it's definitely, we can actually see the struggles. You can actually see not just the event organizers trying to come up with very new ways very, very quickly. Governments, of course, are slow to issue protocols because one of the things you keep hearing is that we do not know enough about the virus to say things definitely. Bundesliga, which is well among one of the best organized leagues in the world, their federation actually put up the protocols and proposed to government. And when you listen to them, I was like, oh my God, we can't do this. They are putting all the players in isolation, and before you're allowed to get on the pitch, they have been tested. You've tested negative at least twice, and then for 7 days before games, they are in isolation in hotels. They are away from their families, and after that, because one of the things that is clear, I don't know whether Martin, you've tried running with a mask on. Chances of swallowing it are very high. I mean, you just can't do it. It's impossible to run with a mask on. And in Bundesliga, the players were allowed didn't have their masks on. But there are some ways we are creating. Tennis Federation in Kenya, I'm really pleased in what they're trying. They have already come up with the issue of having different balls so that only one player has one set of balls and the other person doesn't touch it, and things like that. But then they're not shaking hands, which is things that we normally do. But the protocols are going to be very difficult to enforce. The London Marathon, which was postponed to October 4th, if I'm not wrong, one of the things they're saying is that it's likely they're going to have a start line of elite only. I know they have like 30, 40 elites, and forget the 50,000 people who actually come to participate in this. And the stats are usually like, you can hardly stretch your hands across a normal marathon, even a Stanchart marathon, the Beyond Zero marathon. At the start, you have 10,000 people, 20,000 people. We can't social distance. We pass on bottles on the course for water and so on. We have 1,000 people working. So yes, big difference. Normal marathons in Nairobi, we have up to 1,000 people working. So those people out of a job. As event organizers, we have to just think out of the box. If there's a box right now, start working out our own protocols, then present them to government, as opposed to waiting for government to give us the protocols, because they are busy, dealing with a real crisis. We are trying to just get back into the business. So.
Right. Well said. Thank you very much, Peter, for those insights. It's incredible how time flies when I'm sitting talking to you guys about the one thing I'm so bad at, sports. But you guys make it so interesting. So right about now, I'd like us to wrap up with your closing thoughts on this situation, on the way forward, and of course, inspiring hope for the next generation of athletes, and for athletes who feel like this should have been their year, but they have to wait just a little bit longer. And we'll start with you, Marty.
Yes, well, I mean, we're going through a very difficult time in sports. Particularly for athletes and coaches, guys who are involved in sports. So I feel that this year and the next few years is going to be quite difficult in terms of participation, the financial impact on the sports across the board. So it's going to have to, players and athletes are going to have to look at ways to, first of all, stay fit and stay mentally motivated, because this is all they can do, and this is what they're good at. So I see the amount of support that athletes and coaches and everybody in the industry, for that matter, have to support. We have to come together and support ourselves and find ways to look at the future, so that we can bounce back and bounce back well.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And Peter, your thoughts as well.
Let's say that number one, I think we are facing the biggest disruption of our time that's known, and as a sports industry, we are not included in essential services, so we're probably right at the bottom of the priority list for corporates, for government. So it's up to us to actually come up with our own ways of trying to ensure that, number one, the sports people stay active, that we will have a sport still available to this world at the end of this season. So the local federations, the local organizations, we need to get together and start working out protocols to get some of the sports in. But most importantly, ensuring that our athletes are remaining fit. We need to find a way for some of the resource areas that we had, like schools. How do we get schools back so that the sports can follow? Because schools, by and large, have the most facilities, not just in this country, but globally, to support sports, especially at a grassroots level. We will then, of course, be hoping that the elite will carry our flag. The Olympics will still be there, hopefully next year. The world champs are still coming. Quite a number of world championships will be there next year scheduled. So we'll be looking for the elites there and ensuring that they remain focused. As for the contact sports, that might be might be a while. I don't know what's going to happen there. But there are many sports that are going to be disrupted. We just need to, like every other business, this year is not the year we're going to declare huge profits. This is the year where we just have to do enough to ride the wave, and becomes a lesson for us to always have reserves. I mean, it was good to see the IOC being able to come up, I think, with 800 million to give the organizers of the Japan Olympics so that they are actually cushioned. If they didn't have any reserves from the previous one, that would not have been possible. And I really doubt a majority of our sports federation, whether we have any reserves that can actually keep us going for 6 months or 3 months. So let it be a lesson for us to just be more resilient and create brands that can actually survive such pandemics in future or crisis. It might not be a big pandemic coming in future, but there will definitely be small crises that will come in now and then that we need to survive.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Martin. As always, it's been a pleasure chatting with you and just listening to your thoughts on the way forward for athletes and sports in general. Thank you very much for catching up with me on this episode. As always, a quick reminder, click subscribe, hit notifications so you never miss an upload every Monday. Do drop a comment below at the bottom of this video. Tell us what you think about our panelists and what they've shared and what you think your way forward is. But until our next episode, live out loud, stay safe, and stay sane in all that you do. Bye, guys. And thank you.